Welcome back to building a full stack CRUD app from scratch Areno. I'm your host, Luke Areno, and we're here continuing this little tutorial. Previous vid, lots of crap to get this goofy looking button and these awful looking links and these terrible looking forms and notes now all loading with some style behind them. Granted, we haven't added any style whatsoever. We just added the build process, the webpack loaders, and all that crap to get this appearing right here, right? All that work for this. But hopefully we can actually make some progress and make this thing look a bit nicer. There's actually a few more things that I want to add before we move forward, right? Like I said, we're going to build a drawer in this video. That's actually, if we go to the daisyui, ooh, that's really zoomed out. Of course, I'm going to have to zoom in and out to like mess with. That doesn't look too good in the OBS recording window. Hopefully it's clear on y'all's video. Again, you could always just go to the daisyui.com//components to look at the documentation for what we're going to build. They do have examples of HTML and JSX when it comes to building out these components. So where the heck is the drawer? Be in, not layout, but probably navigation, dummy. And this is gone. It's just vanished. Like a fart in the wind, it's gone. Yo, dog, where did the drawer even go? Did I, like, navigate to the wrong place? Did I just make up that it's a component available here? Oh, there it is. I'm just blind. Layout. Okay, whatever. Yeah, so they have a drawer, and they show you the structure of said drawer, and they show you how an HTML is going to work, and the JSX is, well, it's kind of comical because the JSX is just a bunch of... The only difference between these two, as of right now, is just the class name instead of class attribute that we have to write in JS/TSX what we're doing, and the HTML4 attribute has to become HTML4 to make sure that our compiler and bundler doesn't confuse that for a for loop. We have to make that specification. So anything hyphenated becomes camel cased, and protected keywords in JavaScript, such as the for and class keywords, are used for making class objects and for loops. You have to account for those. But I think it's funny that the JSX just does that, and even though it's the same thing as HTML, and sometimes your linters can fix that for you and the point being they don't have it being controlled by state, which is what you should be doing. It is still done through imperative animations via CSS and labels and overlays and things like that. So I'll show you how to actually build out a drawer that does something like this using some state-controlled elements, because that's what we have to do. So we'll get there. We'll get there, folks. Something else I'm going to be installing and doing in this video is one of my favorite libraries to add icons to my projects. We could go and find a free online SVG icon library. Lord knows I probably have one in my Covalence folder somewhere amongst my random resources somewhere around here. I just happen to prefer the ease of use when it comes to generating them via this React icons website. And in particular, I always go to game icons to use them here as well. So if I needed an awesome sword somewhere, GI stands for game icons. And they have lots of very cool looking icons for using across your applications. And it makes just, again, having a button or something be visual versus not is the way to go. So I like to include them wherever possible for my labels and buttons and things like that. You can, and I guess I can show y'all what you would have to do in React in order to use things like emojis or these icons. Typically, you have to write a span that has some kind of several attributes on them for class names, for styling, and typically for screen reader accessibility, you would apply ARIA labels or things like that to them. But the nice thing about React icons is that it has all that nicely built in for you, so you don't have to build individual components to get all these icons to include their alternate text if they don't appear, or something goes wrong, or a screen reader can read them, and be able to pass them props such as an easy passable prop such as size or color or class names. Then I very much enjoy using this React icons library as their usage here for bringing in a beer icon. You can see it's as easy as saying import curly braces, React icons / and which library you're going to be using. So they have all these built in for you to use. Again, I typically use game icons because that's what I like to do, and I think they look the coolest. It's not always the case. I mean, granted, game icons will take you so far, but if you're looking for something more professional, maybe don't just throw in game icon bloody swords, GI bloody swords into your portfolio projects, or by all means do, right? Just own it if you do. So / name of the library, what you're going to do, right? It'll tell you what these things are going to look like. And then from there, I like how their example is still a class-based component. Old school, baby. Maybe this will be my PR for the day, where I'll go in here and try and pull requests on their documentation and turn it into a function component, because I'm like, nobody writes classes anymore. Punch the microphone there. Sorry about that. Yeah, so all you do then is just render the icon itself as if it were a React component inside of your text components, wherever you need them. Very, very sleek, very, very easy to get up and running with. I dig it a whole lot. So yeah, I'm surprised I don't show like what other props they can pass to these icons in their documentation here. Classic stuff. We're just going to go ahead and have to guess what it is, so maybe on their GitHub information here. And again, this is like, I know some of the props that you can pass it, but this is what I would do in y'all's shoes, where I would scroll through and try and find something here. There we go. So yeah, in terms of props, you can pass it here. You got color, size, class name, inline style if you need to override stuff. You can pass in whatever attributes you need to pass them, including a title for description, accessibility. Okay, cool to know. Good to know. All right, so yeah, that's the props that you have available on there as well. And yeah, something else we're going to include. I typically include this in all of my projects. I've tried writing my own before, and I'm just not great at CSS and styling and things like that, which is why these style videos are like, hey, let's add some tools that'll make our portfolio project here feel a bit more real and alive. As we all know, as developers, we all probably have Chrome, Firefox, Brave extensions, and things like that that help us block modals, because we find them extraordinarily annoying when it comes to, hey, welcome to the first time you're on Instagram. In order to see these person's pictures, make sure you are logged in to view them. Like, we all hate that kind of stuff, even though, from a like marketing and advertising perspective, you kind of need to prompt your users constantly with that kind of stuff to get them to log in, to track their metrics and whatnot. But we're not going to be building any kind of predatory site or algorithm like that that's trying to monotonize somebody's time. We're building a portfolio project to show off that we know our stuff. So I really, 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 really like this library. It is react-toastify. I typically add it to all of my projects because, again, I just like it. And oh, there's a new version. No! Whenever I see like a new version, I'm like, automatically my brain is like, well, I'm willing to bet everything's going to be broken here. So hopefully, I don't think I really use toast on change. It's an alternative toast container component. Okay, I'll have to kind of deal with that on the fly here. So stack toasts, let's see. Breaking changes. I don't think I really use the on change subscriber of the toasts in my particular projects. Again, I also like that they have TypeScript support here as well, which is very nice. And I don't think I use toast.configure in my coding whatsoever. Yeah, I know I use a toast with an icon and message. That's no problem. Color-wise, I override it with Tailwind class names. That's fine and dandy. Okay, so hopefully nothing massively broken is here. So it looks like stacked toasts, because the toast container is something that I do use. And it looks like the second add-on will be released later. There are a bunch of details I need to cover. I don't want to release something too big, and that's really excited. I think that's what we're checking. I like how I'm reading the documentation to myself in this video. But again, welcome to development, right? Oh, I see what it is. Okay, so they stack them in a z-index fashion like that instead of a simple vertical list. Okay. So hopefully that I can still use toast container and stack container. I can mess with it during this video. By the way, like I was attempting to say before, I noticed there was a migrate to v9, and I'm like, oh no, more breaking API changes. But thankfully, they're not like React Router DOM that introduce breaking changes for the sake of introducing breaking changes, is what the meme is about React Router DOM. But yeah, I mean, this is welcome to modern web development. They're going to have updates to things that completely break the way you've been using it for quite some time. But again, they have like this push. This GUI here that lets you build out your toasts and what they might look like, where they might appear, and their general behavior. I think it's very cool, right? That it's so easy to make toasts that look like this, that just give your portfolio projects the extra bells and whistles for them to look pretty dang cool, right? So it's quite nifty what it can do. I like adding it to my projects because of everything that's coded in it. Again, writing your own simple toast that even just like doesn't have any animation, because that's typically where I fall super short. Having just a toast appear when something happens and then just vanish after some set timer happens to go off. That's cool. That's not that bad to code. Maybe I can make it like a standalone series, or make my coworkers, Andrew or Matt, make the video about how to make your toasts. But for now, we're going to take the easy way out on this particular case and use a library for it rather than coding it ourselves, because again, it just has so many bells and whistles already added into it and animations and CSS that I don't feel like fumbling around with for 40 minutes. So with that in mind, let's actually get underway to building some things out here. I'm going to stop the project and install and save my react-toastify install and my React icons install. And I believe they both have TypeScript support, and we're going to learn the hard way if they don't. Let's get back up and running here by doing our dev script, not our start script like I've done in the past where I goofed and made a huge mistake. Everything seems to be working and building just fine still, hard refresh, and nothing magically breaks all of a sudden, which is nice to see. So, actually building out our drawer here. So like I had mentioned, you can take a look at the documentation for the drawer in daisyui to see how this stuff is written out. I'm going to write it as a series of components that we're going to break out into multiples, perhaps. And from there, we'll figure out how to piece it all together, right? So, again, and how we can keep it via, what's it called? A stateful approach rather than a imperative animation via CSS and IDs and HTML4s, for example, right? So ultimately, we're going to have a hamburger button of some kind, open a drawer that should pop it open like that. And you'll notice here in this little, I'm assuming an iframe window, when you click on that darkened overlay, it closes that side drawer. If I click on that, if I link on the side item, nothing happens. We could also pass a function that says, hey, when I click on something in my side drawer, that should also collapse. But that's the important stateful change here that I don't want to handle through imperative animations via CSS. Like, I want React to know whether that side drawer is open or not, because just with JSX like this, this is happening in the DOM, in the browser, and React has no clue that this is actually occurring. So I need to keep it in a stateful style solution. So let's start coding it down that way. From their structure, we see that drawer is the root container, and its children include the toggle, probably this button thing here. Then the drawer content, that it could include your navbar, your page content, and a footer. So this seems like the child of the drawer itself. The children of the drawer will be our navbar and our pages content. This will mean our general views, aka all of our routes. So it sounds like content will be our routes, and then each route's element that it's going to be rendering will be the page's content itself. And our page currently doesn't have a footer, but if it did, that's where it would exist. And then sibling to the content, the drawer content class, we have a drawer side class. This would be where our overlay, that dark overlay that covers the whole page when the drawer is open that we can click on to close, needs to be there. And also a child of the drawer side will be our sidebar content, our menu, or whatever you want to build here, right? So it looks like they use a couple of combinations. They have like a menu layout or navigation component that has a couple class names. They're going to be following along with this one. And I'll have some style that I've kind of pre-written for the video. So again, I don't fumble around for 20 minutes going, that color doesn't quite work here. Let's try and add some more padding or margin to this one to make it look a bit nicer. I'm not going to stress on that in this build here. We're going to make things look half decent and go from there. And then again, maybe like an optional, like I'll put a commit. They all can, if you're curious how I styled something, might do it off camera and just add some general styling. And again, if you're curious, there'll be a commit that you can look at to see where I added all those class names to make things look decent. So without further ado, says guy that's been talking for 13 minutes, let's actually dive on in here and get to coding. So first and foremost, like I had mentioned, our routes here are going to be the content of our page. So clearly our drawer, let's just kind of imagine we have one here. It's going to come out here, and it's going to have to wrap all of our routes. So, I utilize the collapse feature in VS Code so I can visualize how this is eventually going to look. That's what our drawer is going to have to do here. And, over time, as we add more and more routes, and also, remember when I was talking about that toast container? Well, guess what? It's also going to be appearing somewhere out here as well, where I'll have like my toast container from that react-toastify library. And as you can see, And if we added Redux here, or even more context providers or things like that, where we'd add more and more components at the app level, again, something that I find that you've kind of graduated from like your newbie React development phase when you start adding more things at the app level for global usage, or for like CSS resets or normalize or whatever. Like the more and more you do that, the more and more cluttered your app component used to be. Whereas a lot of my students from our full stack course have their app is typically browser router, navbar, routes, route. And that's all it ever ends up being. And again, the more routes we add and the more context things, the more things we keep adding to it, the more cluttered it's going to be. So I'll show you another way that typically you'll see larger scale applications approach building out their app. Rather than having a simple file here, I'm going to be converting some things around because I'm going to be making a folder by the same name of app here. I'm going to make sure that I'm not confusing my compiling and bundling process of what's going on here by simply disabling my server at the moment. In the client folder, we're going to make a new one called capital APP, inside of which we'll have our index.tsx and we'll have our app routes.tsx. There we go. Okay, so app routes, as its name sounds, it's going to be using some React, so I got to make sure that it is in the scope of this file. Const app routes. At the moment, I don't think it'll have any arguments. We're going to see here in a moment. But again, we've been doing this consistently, so let's be consistent. Interface app routes props. Props app routes props return. And it's going to return that list of routes from React Router DOM. So let's go ahead and set up those imports. We're going to have our routes component determined here, as well as our list of individual route components from the React Router DOM library. What we're going to now do is head to our app, and I'm going to, again, just for ease of use, collapse to cut that, Control or Command X, and paste it into this return. Now, the next thing we are missing are all the components we're rendering themselves. So I'm going to copy and paste my list of imports here, like so, to make my life easy. So we're going to go ahead and paste that here, and we'll have to switch up these imports as well. I believe to say go up one directory rather than the same directory. Auth provider and navbar won't be here, so I think those are safe to remove for now. We're going to find out the hard way if they weren't, but it looks like everything is now honky-dory. Export default app routes. We have it exported out for ease of use elsewhere. Okay, now the index.tsx in the app folder is going to represent the new app component itself. So let's go ahead and bring some code in out of laziness. Import React from React. Interface app props. Boom. Bring that in, close that curly brace, and we're going to have a new return appearing here. I'm going to need to have my app routes imported. App routes from app routes. I realize I just typoed that over there. Again, why I don't typically like doing default exports, but there you go. Import app routes from app routes. Looking good, looking good. From there, we need to have the rest of this setup written here as we have it in app. So I'm going to copy and paste the current return statements that we have going on. Can we use this autocomplete quick fix? This is why I do like TypeScript. Let's see what happens. Survey says, let's go! Yeah, buddy! I'm going to kind of move things around here, right? Cool. So, yeah, looking good. And in place of our old routes that we cut and pasted, we now should have our app routes simply written there. And there we go. We're going to export default app out of this index file. And now we have some separation of concern between our components and our app now, because now we have a file where we're actually going to have all of our routing logic and fun happen. The app index root entry file right here represents just a general layout and combination of components that build out our application, as well as any high-level stuff such as a Redux store, additional contexts outside of our auth provider, and maybe even if we want to change browser to hash router for deployment purposes or whatever we want to do, that's where we're going to come to find that information here. So yeah, that's going to make sure that I'm now safely able to delete the app file itself. Again, this is something common you'll see in bigger scale applications that do begin to add a lot of top-level things for global use. And that should not affect our import app from app, because now it should be looking at the app directory index file by default. So hopefully it doesn't break anything here. So what would cause issues, though, is having a folder name the same name of a file name in the same directory. So that's why I chose to fully stop my server here, restart it to trigger a full recompile and rebundle to make sure it recognizes a folder file name swap. Looking good. Refresh, and hopefully nothing is broken here. Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm talking about, folks. Okay. Now, I went through all that trouble so I can start adding some things in a bit more of a clear fashion. Like I had said, we need to add a drawer, a sidebar, and maybe some kind of nav where the hamburger icon is going to exist. So that's going to be wrapping our app routes here, okay? So let's go ahead and code out some of the simple stuff. Maybe in my components folder, I will now choose to add a new file. We'll call it the drawer.tsx. We are going to set up, I really needed a template. You know what? I've said it. How many times have I said it now, folks? Oh my goodness. Why did I decide to do this? Tech use, all these dumb icons I've been goofing with. We'll say component template because I'm so dumb that I keep having to do this. TS import React from React interface template props const template equals props template props fat arrow function return div h1 close div export default template component format. All right, now this has some code that I can now copy and paste from. So copy from the README where I have my component template now. Booyah! And then we can call this now drawer instead of template. And voila, we have our drawer ready to go. Yeah, so from the class names and IDs and whatnot, I'm going to kind of blow through this one kind of quickly, and then we'll talk about what props is going to need to do its job. So at the top level, we're going to delete that H1 because we're not going to actually have to view this here. A class name of drawer is indeed required. Surprise, surprise. We're going to need to also have a, I think, aria expanded indicates whether the element or another grouping element controls is currently. Yeah, so for their purposes, how daisyui has written their drawer, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have that written there. What is this variable called open? Well, it's going to be a Boolean that we're going to be passing in at some point in time. So open is going to be a required prop to this component, will be of type Boolean. So I now need to write props.open technically, but because we're fancy cool kids in this part of the world and in classroom and whatever, there's fancy, this part of the world, Luke, come on, there's fancy and cool kids everywhere. We are just cool kids because you're following my cool kid playlist series, CRUD app, Scratch, whatever it's called at this point. Okay, we're going to go ahead and destructure that, was what I'm trying to say here, because we're too cool for school to write props dot something, right? We're going to destructure because that's how awesome we are. So yeah, that's going to be a Boolean value we pass to that label, that aria expanded label right there, that will allow daisyui to help us build out our overlay and side drawer when it's open and not open. Now, what's interesting about the side drawer being open or not open, it actually comes from a... No, that's the button. Where is it? Yeah, so it actually comes from this input right here. It is actually a checkbox that is not visible that tells us whether the drawer is open or not, right? So that's what's a clever thing here. It's all based on this checkbox, right? Yeah, you can uncheck the checkbox using JavaScript or using the label tag, which I think is very interesting. And that's how you, the tricks that they use with daisyui and Tailwind to build this drawer out. So we're going to make an input element. Its type will be checkbox. It will have an ID of, we'll call it super drawer, because that's what we're going to call it, because I don't know, that's what I want to call it. Super drawer, because this is a super cool drawer for super cool developers. Class name, it needs to have a class name of drawer-toggle for it to do its job correctly. And I'm going to make it read-only because, again, I don't want it being clicked via anything in the browser. I just want it to be kind of in the background there. Read-only, and it needs to know if it has been checked or not. It needs to be controlled by state, which is going to be done via that very same Boolean we set up in the props called open, right? And there is our beautiful drawer and the input. That's going to be a read-only checkbox, so we're not going to bother with a label or any code. And the code to open it will be controlled by React state right here. Now, sibling to this checkbox input in the drawer, we need to have our div that is going to be rendering our pages content, right? And that is called the drawer content class. And this is where we're going to render anything the drawer is wrapping, aka all of its children. So we're going to go add children, React. It'll be any kind of valid React node. Okay. And destructure it right yonder. There we go. All right, so that's going to be our app routes and anything else that the drawer is wrapping itself. Maybe a nav bar and the content and the footer, whatever it needs to be. And then it needs to know what the side drawer is going to look like. So we're going to say, make a div with class drawer-side. That's going to be the class name for that right there. And again, if you're wondering where I got these, it's right from the documentation about how the class names are built out right here. So from there, this drawer side is going to have inside of it the hidden dark overlay that I've been talking about this whole time, right? Right here, this dark overlay. What does it say right here? Yeah, the drawer overlay needs to be that overlay that covers the whole page when the drawer is open, that dark bit right there, which ends up being this right here. This label is where that magic sauce comes from. So it's a label. So on this drawer side, we're going to have its child be the label with a class name of drawer-overlay for, yeah, and the HTML4 property, and which is just 4 in HTML, has to be in JSX, it's HTML4, should coincide with the ID name you chose for your read-only checkbox. So for accessibility purposes, this is not in the scope of this tutorial series, but it is good to start building up some good habits to keep that in the back of your head. Use HTML4 properties, typically meet the ID of what they're coinciding with, right? So that's going to be our label and stuff right there. So at the moment, we have no logic that says when this thing is clicked, React should know and re-render a change in the drawer's state. So technically, the drawer state of being open or not, a Boolean value is controlled by open, but we should have some kind of function to toggle its visibility. We will, and we're going to pass that in as an on-click to our overlay right here that says on-click overlay, right? And again, this is a variable. I could call it pizza poo-poo. It doesn't matter. I'm calling it on-click overlay because that makes sense to me, and clearly it's going to be a function that will run once the on-click event occurs. Let's go and add that to our list of destructures first and foremost. Actually, it should be the props first and foremost. I'm going to destructure it right there. On-click overlay. I think we're going to call it just that right there. We're going to say it's just a function. It isn't not going to return anything. It's going to be a function that runs on a click. So that's going to be all happy there, right? It doesn't actually return anything. It just alters state. And we can use IntelliSense in just a moment here to figure out what's going on. So, okay. That's what we got going on here, and just under the label, but inside of the drawer side class name, needs to be whatever side drawer we're going to be rendering here. So basically more React content. So whatever our side drawer is going to be, it's going to be right here. Again, I could also import it and use it directly here, but I'm going to call it the side for now, and we're going to see if I can get this figured out here. It's going to be another React component, so I wonder if React node will count for that for TypeScript types. I mean, it'll be a component element technically. And React node is just anything, yeah, string number, anything that's safely renderable in React. We'll call it that for now. Who cares at this point? Okay, so that's gonna be our props right here. And again, because I'm a weirdo, I'm gonna have all my single word props first and then my function at the end there. All right, that's pretty decent. That's the class names that you need to get set up for this sucker going on right now. I have no side technically coded yet, so let's go ahead and make that, because that's going to be the replacement of our current nav bar. Our nav bar is a list of links that simply go to a certain place, but our side drawer is going to be a replacement of this. So here we go. I'm going to head back to my README to copy my template. I should have done this a long time ago. In my components, we'll call it now the side drawer.tsx, paste a reno, replace the keyword template with side drawer to make our lives easy. And from there, we're going to go ahead and start building this out. Like I said, it's going to be a replacement of that navbar, so I'm going to be importing not just a link component, but I'm going to import specifically the navlink component because it has some additional props that we might be able to use to our advantage. Unlike, it behaves exactly like a link component, except you can pass it different styles based on whether the nav link is a match to the URL bar or not, right? So in our application here, if I'm on the home page and it recognizes we're on the home page, a nav link can apply different styling to the path that it matches. If it goes to /login, home should maybe lose an underline and login should be underlined. And that is doable with nav links because of additional props that you can pass to them via functions that capture, hey, am I an active nav link or am I not an active nav link? So there's some cool stuff we could do with that, right? So let's go ahead and build out our nav links here. Now, the way that menus are built in daisyui is, well, they are built with ULs and LIs with anchors inside of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap this div to an unordered list. And we're going to delete this h1 and do an li with a nav link inside of it. So this is going to be our general structure for our components. Now we need to know that when the link is clicked, what it does. So just like our links that we had back in our nav bar, this might actually be easy if I just go back over here and copy these, right? Now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, we'll do that for now. Okay, so there is our first nav link. I'm going to paste the rest of them down here and delete that home one. And I'm going to fix all these nav links by doing my fancy command/control D trick right there. So we have all of our nav links good to go. Now, they're not all children of one LI. So you know what we're going to do? I'm going to move this one around the first one because that makes sense. And for the rest of these, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to build out LIs at the beginning of all these nav links right there, and close the LIs around them for some quick coding. If you're wondering how I did that, that is clicking somewhere with your text cursor where you want to start typing. And if you want to start typing in multiple places, on Mac, I believe it's Option. On Windows, it is Alt. So I hold Alt and click everywhere I want a text cursor to appear to start typing at one time. And just like that, we have our LIs built out and ready to go. So from here, yeah, class names for the UL. Thankfully, the LIs don't need class names in daisyui. Again, another reason I like it so much. We need to have, well, surprise, surprise, this is a menu, so we need to have our menu class name written here. We need to have some padding on this drawer. We're going to have overflow y auto. I do not want a scroll bar appearing on, I'll comment on what just happened there, because y'all notice my class name switched around for no reason. No reason. Yeah, so we need to have overflow y auto. I don't want a nav bar or a scroll bar appearing on my drawer menu here unless it's going to actually become that many links long that it needs its own scroll bar. I'm going to say width 80, just so it's like a decent size sidebar here. We'll do BG base 100 to make it like a similar color to the rest of my application's background, but not quite. And we'll have text base dash content. These are just class names for styling the background of the drawer and the text color of the drawer here. And hopefully these LIs and nav links look decent enough inside the drawer itself. We're about to find out here in just a moment. Those are the class names I want to apply right there. Now, if you're wondering how I am getting autocompletes and why my class names shifted when I saved the file with my autosave feature, that's actually because, I should have mentioned this when we also chose Tailwind, I have some extensions that give me a hand here. I highly recommend you all find an extension. There might even be better ones these days compared to the ones I found. Tailwind CSS IntelliSense by Tailwind Labs themselves is a VS Code extension that gives you IntelliSense autocomplete help with Tailwind CSS class names. That way, you don't have to constantly jump to the documentation if you remember some bits of what you're trying to do here. Highly recommend y'all download and install the Tailwind CSS IntelliSense extension. I also use another extension that I personally enjoy, called Headwind, an opinionated class sorter of Tailwind CSS, right? So what it does is, I think Yeah, I think it happens automatically when I save my code, that it automatically changes those class names around. So headwind is what moved my class names around upon saving my file and formatting it. You can see it has an opinion of the order of class names that need to appear on this class name list. This is very convenient when you're messing a lot with padding and margin. It bumps all that kind of good stuff to the beginning of the class list. So anytime you're wondering, why does this thing look off, or I have to bump this, you don't add it in the middle somewhere and your eyes visually lose what that thing is. That was an issue I had with Bootstrap all the time, where I would mix and match where I do padding and margin on components. Like, is it the end of the class list, the middle of the beginning, or somewhere jumbled in between? Hard to debug stuff visually, but with Headwind, all their padding and margin stuff heads to the beginning of the class list, which makes it so much freaking easier to find out and debug some kind of CSS issue with matting. I can't talk today. Matting? You know what I mean. Padding and margin. Okay. So yeah, that's why I like Headwind a lot. It helps manage the problem with Tailwind CSS that I talked about yesterday, 2 days ago at this point. The last video is that their class names, the class lists can get very, very long. So with an opinionated class name sorter, it's much more convenient to circumvent that particular problem. So that's why I highly recommend Tailwind CSS, IntelliSense, and Headwind or something like it. And get in the comments and discussions below or in Discord, which, by the way, you should like, comment, and subscribe to these videos. If you find a better one than that, because I actually haven't looked in a while because I've just grown accustomed to the one I'm currently using. But okay, there is our lovely side drawer, and it will have some props passed into it eventually, but I'm gonna show y'all why we're not gonna talk about it quite yet. So we have the drawer, and we have a side that we can now pass it as a prop, which means I can now theoretically render the drawer even if I can't open it yet. So let's go back to our app index, because that's what we're gonna be messing with now. Let's go ahead and, no. Let's go to components index, because you guessed it, we got to make sure they are appropriately exported out from our components directory. And side drawer. There we go. Coolio. Okie dokie artichoke. Got them exported. Now we can head back to our app index and include them in the list here, where I can say, I would like to have my drawer component, please, and my side drawer component imported. This nav bar will be nuked because we will no longer need it, theoretically. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll leave it there for now. But our app routes and our nav, I'm going to cut them for now because I'm going to replace them with a drawer that's going to be wrapping our contents right there. Okay, so remember the prop called side in my drawer component itself represents whatever the side drawer is going to be. So again, I could have just rendered it directly in there and done some other things, but whatever, we're going to take this approach for now. Because I like to point out this to my students, because they always typically, I mean, again, I don't blame them. They underutilize children when rendering components. It's a very cool way in how React works, right? It's div soup. It's just returning divs inside of divs inside of divs. I see a lot of my students and newbie React developers underutilize the children property of components that wrap other components. It's a very convenient way to not have to write a ton of props, individual props in code, if you're going to be rendering just more TSX anyway. And I'm doing it this way also to show y'all that props don't just have to be like data, like a Boolean, a number, a string, an array, an object, right? My students tend to stick to that a lot, but they can be, I mean, look at our app routes. A prop to the route component is a whole ass another component, which you can pass more props into if you wanted to. That's something that, again, that y'all utilize, my students, and maybe some watchers of this video that are newbie React devs following along. They typically use props as passing in just data. You can pass in whole ass components if you want to. So yeah, you know what we're going to do? We're going to pass in that side drawer as a whole ass component into that prop for drawer. So right now, my TypeScript error is telling me that we're still missing a couple of other props for this thing to do its job. And that's going to come from some state controls. So because I'm going to need this So you're wondering, why wouldn't I include the state of the drawer being open or not inside of the drawer component itself? That would make the most amount of sense. We're going to have to know that information also in the side drawer. So you can say, we'll render it here and then deal with it that way. Okay, but there'll be some other instances where we need to know that state of the drawer being open. For example, if we leave our navbar component and add something to it later, it may also need to know if that drawer is open or not, so the navbar can or cannot be clicked on. So there's multiple instances where we might need to know the state of the drawer being open or not, and we're going to make a choice. I could choose to do it here and render things differently, but for now, I'm going to choose to add it to my application state level. So I'll say uState const, we'll call it const, I can't type, visible set visible will be the Boolean state used to control this. By default, it's going to start as false. We're going to const toggle visible will be our function that will call set visible, and I want to make sure I don't run into any shenanigans with bad closures or queued state changes. So I will use the callback syntax to make sure I always close around the correct previous state if someone's spamming or doing something weird to it. And now toggle visible will be whatever we called onClick overlay will be that function now. There we go. Yeah. Oh, I was right. Look at that. Function return void because it actually returns nothing. It just runs this set state function. From there, we're going to have whether the drawer was open or not as a prop. Needs to be whatever the visible Boolean value is here. And as you can see now, our drawer is happy. We have props.children, props.open, props.onClick overlay, and props.side all accounted for. And it looks like TypeScript's happy with me, which is quite surprising because I typically never do things correctly the first time, right? So also, if you noticed here, yeah, we'll get that in a second. Looking good. Okay, looking good so far. As of right now, I have no way of actually having it open or not. So let's go ahead and add that maybe to our navbar, or we can call out the test button, maybe something like that, right? Let's pass that into, you know what, we'll pass it into our navbar, right? Because the navbar in our app is right here. So the navbar could theoretically toggle the visibility or not. So we're going to pass that in to our nav, and we'll just call it toggle visible as the same prop name. So let's go add that to our list of props in navbar. We should have toggle visible is a function that returns nothing, because that's true. Destructure it, because we're super cool like that. Toggle visible. And inside of here, we're going to include that a button to close and open it. But these links don't need to be here anymore, because theoretically they are now being handled by our lovely side drawer. So we can nuke those and clean up our import statements. There we go. From there, I can say bring in a bouton, and inside of there, let's say open dat drawer is going to be the lovely text we have inside of there, and the on click of this button is what's going to toggle that visible function right there. That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, let's see if this sucker works or not. It should. I hope it does. Look at that, folks. Click on the overlay. Sidebar closes. Open that drawer. Go to login. Ooh, well, that's interesting. Do we want this functionality or not? This is a decision that you can make. I'm sure if there's like someone that has UI, UX experience out there, they can probably tell me. Ooh, that's interesting. I'll tell you why that's happening in just a second here. But yeah, why is this active class name? Is there some kind of class name on this right here? What's going on? Nope. What is going on right here? So yeah, it's adding an active class when it is indeed active to that current path. So when I go to the login path, the nav link is smart enough to recognize that it can add a class called active to whatever link is currently active based on what's in the URL bar. That's what's different about links and nav links. Nav links will look at that URL location, and if it's a match to the path of where it goes to, it will add that active class name. Now we can write code to control that ourselves, but that alone is good enough to make our links highlight which one we're currently on here, right? But you'll notice here, if I click on notes, that's just fine. If I click on add note, both notes and add note highlight. That is because they both have the same base matching path. they both begin with /notes. I will have to add at some point additional logic to prevent that behavior, which off the top of my head I can't remember, so I'm going to do it off camera and come back and tell you how to do it later when I look like I know what I'm doing. That's what's happening there between those paths, though. They both start with /notes, so my choices are go make their path names completely unique, or again, go double up and look at how I can specify it has to be an exact match on navlinks, which might just be the keyword I'm looking for. It used to be exact, but of course it's no longer anymore. I wonder if I can look at its props. Something else I like to do here that my students don't utilize a lot often is you can go to a thing's definition to take a look at what kind of props it has available to it here. So sometimes that can tell you what's going on. Oh boy. So navlink props, what do we got? Class name, style, children, all the classic attributes you'd expect. Children, is active, is pending. Class name, is active, is pending. End, style. Okay, so case sensitive. Yeah, like I said, I'll have to look into what I need to do later. I'm gonna be really annoyed if I have to write like some custom string logic to determine whether I'm on that path or not here. So I'll deal with that in a separate video. All right. But it looks decent, right? Like I said, with the padding and whatnot, it doesn't look that bad. The question here is, do you want, if you click on a link, should that drawer close automatically or not? If we wanted it to close automatically, all we need to do is pass in that toggle visible prop into this component, okay? And we simply add it to, as an on-click, to all of my nav links. So I'm going to do a Control-Command-D situation here. So I can add an on-click that passes in toggle visible to all of these things, which we're going to destructure toggle visible like that. Then, wherever I'm rendering it, I come back out yonder. There's the side drawer, and check this out. Toggle visible, pass in my toggleable visible function. So again, not only can I pass in entire whole-ass components as a prop into another component, which again, typically I stick to a children method rather than a named prop method, but you can also daisy chain in props on that component as well. So while this seems a little bit ridiculous, I kind of chose to do it this way just to show y'all some cool tricks you could do with React components and their props in this little video series, which again, my React course goes into in more detail than this. Now, I'm not saying this is the fantastic pattern. Again, it's just tools for your tool belt. There you go. That is, and that will change the behavior now of these drawer elements, these LIs and this UL, to not only go and highlight that link, but also automatically close the drawer because, well, that makes sense, right? So there we go. Okay, so next up is, well, having a button that says open that drawer is not something you typically see all that often. So we're going to bring in import from React icons / game icons. And again, how do I know this exists? I would go to the React icons documentation, write out the word hamburger. Should I make it an actual hamburger? Or should I make it like a legit hamburger menu? Again, if you're trying to make like a more professional feeling portfolio, you know, I think other devs would appreciate seeing an actual hamburger, but we're going to actually call it this one here. So copy it to the clipboard, paste it here. We can see that class name comes into play here. Not class name, but that import name, and it renders as its own icon as a component like that. And yeah, and then from there, we can add some class styling onto it in just a moment. But yeah, that's what we should see instead of, you guessed it, a button that says open that drawer or something else ridiculous like that. An actual little icon happening right there. So to make a eventual navbar here, or button or a div, I don't know what we're going to do here for class names. I want to make this hamburger a little bit bigger though, so we'll add text to XL. And we're going to change its size on bigger screens here, which is how you do breakpoints when it comes to Tailwind. You add MD, LG, XL, LG. I said that, LG, XL, and 2XL. I don't know how high it goes these days. But yeah, that's how you do breakpoints. Like, say, by default on mobile devices, that's what I mean by mobile-first design. I think of mobile design first, and then when I get it looking decent there, right? That's a decently sized button. Maybe on larger screen sizes, I want that button to be bigger. So that's how you could say, on mobile, I want it to be size 2XL. On anything probably like tablet and higher, I want it to be 3XL in size because it can be bigger on bigger screens, but it can't take up too much real estate on smaller size screens. It really depends on, again, playing around with it. I'm going to go with my gut here on that one. So with the button, I'm also going to add some class names to it so it's recognizable as a button. We'll say button dash square, button dash ghost, which makes it an empty appearing button here. So, boop. And by making a button component from daisyui, we have also added, we just added some like highlightability to it, responsiveness to it, some padding and some text sizing on it. As you can see, brand colors, ghost is one of the colors of daisyui that makes it just a non-visible button right there. And that way, as you see, it bumped it from the corner of the screen there. It gives it that little action that when we mouse over it, it's recognizable as a clickable element. And I think, and we won't notice that on mobile because you don't have a hover on mobile. Mobile. I just cannot talk today. But you see, making it a button just kind of offset it from the corner of the screen there so it looks a bit more official. But there you go. There is our awesome little drawer with working work with me links going on right now, which is what I'm talking about. So that's a huge chunk of that done, which is navigation and doing some cool side drawer action, which I'm all about these days. I'm going to close out them components. Next, we are going to set up our toast container. Toast container. The question, however, is the toast container, does it even work that way anymore since I saw that it was like an update to, unfortunately, its API? What version did I install? Let's go take a look, y'all. Because version 9 is the version that it was talking about in its documentation. That's why I installed, so hopefully what I remember about writing this code here will be how it works. So from react-toastify, please bring in our toast container. And again, it might say deprecated, we'll see. I guess not yet, but maybe we can mess with stack container as well to see how that thing functions. But yeah, it just needs, I mean, I don't really know if the toast container really needs to care about the state of auth. I mean, I can make it even sibling to browser router since I'm not going to be doing any routing from inside the toast container. But, you know, for now, we'll just go ahead and include it here anyway. We'll go toast container. It's a self-closing component right here, and it's going to have a couple props that I like to do. For positioning, I'm going to do a position of bottom-right. How do I know these props? I built this out before, and again, on the documentation for react-toastify, you can find these props here. And a position is a string value you can pass it that says, here's where I wanted this toast to generally appear. I want it to automatically close my toasts after 3 seconds, and those 3,000 milliseconds. I do not want my toast to be draggable across the screen because my users will, I don't know, no, we're not going to do that. And pause on hover. If my mouse is hovering over it, I do not want to pause that toast. Maybe that's a feature you want. I'm just going to go with false on that one. So there we go. There's our lovely looking toast container. Okay. So how do we actually test a toast out here? This is not where we're going to be placing any toast kind of logic. We are simply placing the toast container in the root of our application because, again, the toast need to know the screen size of our window so they know where to appear in the bottom right down here. Let's instead go over and let's co-opt this test button to launch some different toasts. So now that toast container is set up, I can close my app, head over to my views. We're going to mess with components here in a moment, as you can be surprised. That's how we're going to add toasts. But I want to test them here in this button, maybe via an on-click or something like that, right? So let's bring in from react-toastify the actual toast function. It is a function that we run that will launch these toasts. So to do that, we're going to write a on-click function on our test button that is going to run test click. We'll call it test toast is a better name, whatever. It doesn't matter what I call it. What do I even care about that? Why did I even do that? Const test toast is a function that will run what? Evidently nothing because I missed the syntax. There we go. What is it going to run? Well, let's do a toast dot success. So they have variations of these toasts. For example, error, warning, success, all your common class, like Bootstrap style class names you might think of. API reference, toast, what kind? So these are all like the functions and props you could pass. For example, body class name to override its default styling and whatnot. Type, what kind of types do we have? info success warning error. So easy enough, right? We have those kinds of types of toasts that we can actually run here. So we're going to do a success toast, and for now, we're going to pass it a simple string message, because looking back at their API reference, sorry I'm jumping around so much. Introduction. Oh, they have like a basic toast that you could fire as well. You know what? Let's just do that. Woo! Is what it's going to say. All right, so it should launch a toast upon clicking that button. And is it going to work? I don't know. Let's go find out. Oh, okay, it's appearing, so evidently toast container is not doing what I thought it would do. There are the toasts, and they're also not disappearing. Okay, so something's clearly changed in their API. Hey, hey. Why does this have to happen to me? What? So, okay. Let's try switching it to stack container to see if that's what changed here. That's not even an export from react-toastify. What, oh what has your boy missed? Clearly it is something dumb. I mean, I have this working with Tailwind and daisyui and other projects, so I'm curious as to what I managed to mess up. Dead air, Luke. Dead air. Wonder if it's because I haven't applied styling to it yet. That wouldn't matter, though. I figured it would just have a simple looking message appear without too much issue upon that click. Hey, yay. Hold on. I'm going to pause the video real quick and find out something. Jump cut. I tried uninstalling version 9, going back to version 8, looking at one of my old projects where I included it with no issue whatsoever, copied and pasted code from the old project, tried to get it working, nothing was working, it wasn't appearing in the bottom right, it wasn't queuing up, it wasn't, like when I added sizing and colors and whatnot, it took up the entire view of the page, and I'm sitting here and losing my mind wondering, I'm literally firing the toast with no extra options here, I have my toast container set up in my app index to be bottom right. I moved it out of my auth provider thinking that something was wrong there, and I was losing my mind, folks. I had the toast container set up. That's going to be the elements of where this thing should be appearing on the page here. But you know what I forgot to do? You know what I forgot to do? I'm so mad at myself. I should have just looked at the... Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I did the classic developer maneuver of trying everything except just going back to the basics of the documentation. I did not include the appropriate CSS for this thing to do its job. Get in the comments and let me know if this happens to you all the time or it's just me. I'd rather sit here and screw around with old code bases, mess around with their API, try random functions and random things and random styling class names, all instead of just going back to the installation process to see what I missed. Well, on the positive side of things, we have a CSS parser, so... Our CSS loader, so it should know how to handle this import CSS statement because we talked about it in the previous video. So she is up and running. Oh, it's behind me. Hey, 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 look at that, y'all. That's a good looking toast. Oh my God. Oh my God. And they're full width on mobile responsive view right there. So clearly the progress bar color and the text and all that kind of stuff doesn't matter at the moment. I'm so annoyed that I forgot that. I am so insanely annoyed. But you know what? That's development here, folks. That's it in a nutshell. All right, so toast container, it's all fine and dandy. You don't have to do any kind of reinstallation or weird stuff right here. React-toastify version 9 is fine. Toast container is totally fine. Regular toast is totally fine. The thing I messed up is, surprise, surprise, forgetting to write an import statement for its CSS. But we're all running here nicely. Now, we will want to run some toasts across our application in a standard fashion. If I have an error toast, I don't want to have to remember how I styled it in one component versus another. Because, again, I could have multiple kinds of toasts, such as toast.success. And if I want to have a success toast use the same icon and a custom message, right? I mean, that's really not that bad. I might actually... am I going to overthink this? I may. The point being, I want to show you all something we can do here. If I do include something custom with this success, every time I launch a success toast, I need to have a single source of truth of what that success toast might look like. So let's add a new component called the toast component that's going to be basically wrapping itself around whatever we intend to do here. So I'm going to say in this component, import toast from react-toastify. We're going to be writing JSX, so we're going to have React from React written. Now, I'm going to say, let's have a template style toast. Is going to return a div with a class name of flex and items-center, inside of which we're going to display an icon, and we're going to have a span that adds a class name of ml6 with our message that we pass in as an arg. So yesh. Okay, this is the component. So I need to have interface toast props template, and I realize I misspelled template down here. There we go. Props. It'll have an icon, which will be, I don't know what type. For now, we'll do any. And then with message, it'll be a string. And these two things will be required to produce any kind of toast across my application. So now I will add them as destructured props here, because we're awesome like that. There we go. I'll figure out what the icon type is in just a moment. Okay, so now that I have my template toast, let's go ahead and bring in our first one. Let's do success. It'll also receive a message. Now, this is going to be just a function. So what's happening here is I'm replacing my toast.success that I'm testing over here in home with my own version instead. That will be a custom styled and single source of truth when messing with that style, right? So what I would like to do is for it to basically, I don't care about return. We're just going to say do a toast.success, okay? And the way this is going to work is that in the first arg to a success, we can provide it content, which could be just a string like y'all saw before, or it could be an entire other React component. I'm going to call it my toast template toast, evidently. Template toast, okay? That's going to be the content of said thing. The message property will be whatever my message I'm passing into this function happens to be. And now we need to know what icon we're passing in on a success. So it doesn't really matter what we're going to choose here, but I'm going to choose something from React icons, game icons. We'll do the GI, I don't know, maybe save or something like that. That's like I think it's like a floppy disk, what it ends up looking like. So I can say to my icon now, pass in a GI save icon, like that. And from here, we can then begin providing additional arguments. I'm just curious to see if this is going to work here, right? So basically, my success function is going to launch a toast success that uses this basic template I have right here with this message and this icon for all successes across my application, right? So I can say const toast, capital T toast now is going to be a combo of success, warning, info, and error when I begin coding them later. And then from here, we'll export default the toast object that's going to combine all my later functions. But for now, that should be fine. We're going to add to our index as well. Did I add it in views by mistake? I did, didn't I, folks? Drag and drop is a scary thing to do, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to drag and drop toast up into components. And hopefully nothing crazy has broken there. We're going to find out here in a second. But in my index of components, not views, my bad everybody, we will indeed have our custom toast component being exported out from the toast file, right? Hopefully everything's working and the way I expect it to be. We're going to find out if it's not. So from there, we're going to say from our components now, up one into components, bring in capital T toast, and I would do a capital T toast success with a message of woo. I've written toast so many times that it just looks wrong, doesn't it? Losing my mind, y'all. All right, well, again, the whole purpose of this was to replace their toast success where we'd pass in our options to customize it by standardizing what a success toast looks like by having, again, our single source of truth. So there you go. We got the save icon and our text. That's how you could pass in custom styles should you choose to do so, right? So, yeah. Although the icon, the check mark shouldn't be there. It should have been replaced by my custom icon. But alas, maybe I'll figure that out off camera and do it at another point. But the point is, like, you can custom style the toasts now to be however you need them to look. So there is our custom React content, and now we can pass in an object of some options. So for example here, depending on how big this icon needs to be, I could come up here and, well, I'm passing it in that way. I could pass in a span. I have the icon right here, so let's just add a class name of text4xl. So it's a bigger save icon, for example. Again, I know the styling, this is less fun doing styling stuff. So there's a bigger icon, right? Looking good. Then with our custom options object, I can pass in some class names. For example, I like having a border on the left side of my toasts because I kind of like the way it ends up looking. And then from here, we would simply have to write what color it needs to be. Since it's success, I'll do green 500 maybe and see what that looks like. You'll see what this border L adds here in just a moment. Look at the toast right now. Look at the toast right now. Border L. Right? I kind of dig that. I like having that extra border right there that matches that kind of progress bar color. So I think that's pretty slick looking. I mean, again, this is just opinions at this point, but I'm just showing y'all how you can customize these things. A tailwind trick I like to do is I like having my text be a similar color to the background of the toasts themselves. Now, if I recall, I had to write these by hand because BG was not... Like, there's some kind of inline style overriding the body class name of BG Green 900, right? So I don't know if that's going to work the way I expect it to. Yeah, see, so for some reason the BG, I need to find out what the attribute, like what the new attribute is for that background color, because you can see the whole toast is not that background color, just its body, but I need to remove that padding around that border, that body right there. So I know there's one for progress class name, that progress bar. I can make it like a green 600 that will be a little bit darker than the border color. Oop. I don't know if that'll be immediately visible here in these toasts that we're looking at. That's what it currently looks like. So now it's a similar color to the left border now, that green bar color. And I know if you need to pass inline style, you could do that. And I can say, change the background inline style to be whatever green BG green 600 or 800 or 900 might be, which I know my value is 22 from notes before 543D. That is that green color that's similar to that BG green 900. I think I just went to look at the documentation of Tailwind to find out what that value is. I'm going to see if there's a better way to do this, but I remember getting annoyed at the react-toastify not giving me a class name that helped with that. Because out of curiosity, I'm going to comment that out for now. We're going to come over here, and what happens if I add BG like red 500? I want it to look very weird here to see if that's the class name when you have to apply it to. So that didn't change I see the class, the background color didn't change of that thing, which is where I can't remember where the toast class names ended for like the whole thing, right? So I know body class name, progress class name, just class name should be the whole container, but the background doesn't seem to be adding to it, which is very annoying, which is why I had to go to the trouble of looking up what BG green dash, I think 900 was to find that color so I could wind up with that inline style of making it look like that. So that's our toast there, folks. We've got a lovely looking, toast template that gives us nice stacking toast that our user can click on to remove. I will be using them for our error handling as well. So I could, for example, copy success and pass it down and call this one error because it's going to be a toast error message, and we'll include a GI mine explosion for this icon for error messages. From here, we'll simply switch green to red. Should be good to go. And this value, according to Tailwind's docs, is 742A2A for that kind of darker red color to match what the rest of our template toast needs to be here. So cool. Add that list to our exports. Let's go test it in our test button for the home component. Toast.error. Okay. Hey. So there's our message and our explosive toast here. So their icons are now appearing by default, which is annoying because I'm passing in my own icon. Dead air, Luke. Dead air. And this is already over an hour. I need to get going to the gym. So. I'll figure out off camera how to change the default icon of these things here because I don't want them appearing there. Okay, but either way, I think y'all have gotten the idea of what I've been doing with these customized toasts here. You don't actually have to go to this step at all if you just want to use the default colors and things like that. I just wanted to show y'all some more React tricks to set up a component style template that gives us the ability to pass in React TSX content to our toast. But I think this is good enough for the video here. We had this awesome nav bar now working. We have our toast set up and ready to go. So a lot of the places where I'm simply console logging an error on requests or things like that, I can now use a toast.error in place of that. So some cool things we could do with that kind of logic. So yeah, ta-ta for now, and I'll see you all in the next video where we continue styling some stuff, which I'll be doing off camera and making some actual notes for, so you don't see me messing with padding and margin and colors over and over again. So see y'all there.